All right, thank you, Rob. I'm really excited to be presenting to you all today. So I represent Arizona State University. We are a public university in the state of Arizona. We're located in the Phoenix metro area, and we are actually the largest public institution in the country. So we certainly get a large number of applications, and it's important to know how we go about our admissions process. First and foremost, it's really important to know that we like to be known by who we include. We measure excellence by who we include, not who we exclude. And this is done for a lot of reasons. We think it's really important. Our president, Dr. Michael Crow, has found it very important that you can offer a quality education and still offer that quality education to a large number of students. We find that there are a lot of students who are qualified for a college education, and so we want to have very straightforward admissions criteria so that students can see on our website exactly what they need to be admissible, and if they meet that criteria, they know they're going to be a Sun Devil. So we look at two main things. We look at competency requirements, which are the courses you take in high school, and we look at aptitude requirements, such as your GPA and grades. So in terms of the competency requirements, there are 16 core courses that we want to see on your transcript. We're looking for 4 years of math, 4 years of English, 3 years of a lab science, 2 years of social studies, 2 years of the same foreign language, and 1 year of fine arts. These are the only 16 classes that we look at when we calculate your GPA for admission, and we don't take into account any non-academic courses such as physical education or vocational classes. We're really looking at the types of classes you've taken in high school that are going to relate to the liberal arts education you're getting at Arizona State University. So when you're looking at your transcript, we encourage students just to look at these courses. And for a lot of students, that means that their GPA is going to potentially dip a little bit. When you're taking PE and you have elective classes that you really enjoy, you tend to have some A's in those classes that won't translate into your overall GPA that we look at for admission purposes. So we want students to know that when we're looking at this calculation, it's not just the GPA that's listed on their transcript. We're pulling out specific classes. The other of our admissions criteria are the aptitude requirements. And at ASU, we expect students to meet one of 4 criteria. They need to be in the top 25% of their high school class, or need to have a 3.0 unweighted GPA in those 16 core courses, or get a 24 on the ACT or an 1110 on the SAT without the writing portion of either one of those tests. So at Arizona State University, we do not count the writing portion of those tests, only the reading and math portions, as well as the science portion on the ACT. This is the entirety of our admissions criteria. So when a student applies to the university, they apply online, fill out an application, they self-report their senior year courses, but at the same time, we do request students to send in a transcript from their current institution, and we look at their academic record. We know that the greatest predictor of a student's freshman GPA in college is their high school GPA. So that's one of the reasons that's a really strong for us. We also only use our admissions criteria for admissions purposes. So there's no essays or letters of recommendations in our admissions criteria because we're not using this as an honors admissions policy. We do have one of the top honors colleges in the nation, and that has a secondary separate application that does ask for those items, as well as does a comprehensive review for students when it comes to their admissibility. At ASU, we are non-competitive, which we are not comparing your application or your application data to other applicants, and we want to make sure that we're inclusive. So if we have this criteria listed and you meet that criteria, you will be admitted to the university. We want to be very transparent about all of that. So we do use the aptitude requirements for merit-based scholarships. So we can use that information if we have a test score on file for you. We can use that information to award a merit-based scholarship upon admission to the university. But this admission is simple on purpose. So we're really proud that we can list the criteria and students can see right off the bat if they're likely to be admitted or not. We do have an individual review process. So for students who are just below some of these criteria, we can individually review students and look at additional information. But for the most part, we're able to do most of our admissions decisions looking at transcripts and test scores and the application information students fill out online. Thank you very much.
Great, thank you, Casey.
Hi,
Next up, Barbara Polk.
this is Barbara Polk from Chapel Hill, North Carolina, the University of North Carolina, first public university in the country. We have a total student population of roughly 27 to 28,000. That includes our graduate students, law school, medical school, dental school. Undergraduate population of about 16 to 17,000. So I think among these three schools that you're learning about tonight, we sort of represent the mid-size and another public university. Our first year class is usually targeted just under 4,000, around 3,990. So that's a little bit about who we are. In terms of our admissions process, we use the common application, and we're one of those schools who has a holistic approach to college admissions. And a holistic approach means we're going to look at a variety of different factors as we make our admissions decisions. So I'm going to walk you through for us what those various factors are. The first one being academic considerations. And, I think it's pretty obvious. We want to know, why are academics so important? Well, of course, we want to know if you can handle college level work. And I think most colleges in the country would tell you that. Like many other schools as well, though, we want students who are going to be active participants in their education. And the best way for us to evaluate that is to see whether students have been active participants in the past. Have they sought out rigor? Have they sought out academic challenges? How have they done in those challenges? How have they done when compared to the other students in their classroom? We do look, as part of the academic considerations, at standardized test scores. They are not the be-all and end-all that many people would have you believe they are. From our point of view, the rest of your life is not going to depend on what you do 4 hours on a Saturday morning, but they are important. And the reason they're important is because they are an equalizer. So if we see an SAT or ACT score for a student from North Carolina, and we see one from a student from California, and we see one from a student in China, 700 on the critical reading is a 700. It doesn't matter where you've gone to school or what your background is. Whereas the other factors, the courses that are available to students, whether you have advanced placement or international baccalaureate courses available to you, that's going to vary from school to school. We don't want to penalize students who come from school districts that can't afford perhaps to offer as many of those labeled programs like the AP, the IB. But at the same time, we're looking for the students who, when they are offered, are taking advantage of them. We're going to look at the end of grade testing. That's big here in North Carolina. So that's going to be a factor we're going to consider as well. So academics, of course, for us are the foundation. Once we go beyond academics, then we're going to look at engagement. We're going to want to bring together, strive hard to bring together a class of students who can really learn from each other. So even if we did not offer formal classes, we could bring the same group of students together, have them live in the residence halls, have them, interact with each other through these activities, through their community service, through their volunteer work, through whatever is of interest in them, and students would still learn from each other. On top of that, UNC has a very, very strong sense of giving back, and giving back to the state, the country, beyond, in meaningful and in very impactful ways. We want our students to be part of that giving back. So we look at engagement not to see how long the laundry list is, as we say. It's not how many activities can you get onto a resume, but it's what's the impact. So for us, we'd rather see a student, and a student would probably have a better chance for admission with us if the student has been engaged in maybe 2 or 3 or 4 activities really, really been engaged in those activities, shown some commitment, can demonstrate a way that their community, their school, whatever is different because of the impact they've had. We'd much rather see that again than a list of 20 activities where the student is not very engaged in any of them. So the engagement there is important to us. In addition to the academics and the extracurriculars or engagement, we're going to ask for essays. And of course, again, there's the obvious answer. We want to know if you can write, and an essay is a way to do that. But we also want to hear your voice. We're not able to interview as part of our admissions process. So in a large way, the essay can be a substitute for a student's interview. We want to know what students are interested in, and they'll have a series of prompts through the Common Application and through our supplement, and students can choose a couple of those to write their essay about, so they can pick and choose a little bit as to which topics appeal to them the most. But then we really want students to let their voice come through. We want students to show us what they're trying to say, not just tell us. So we encourage students to do more than just say, I went on a mission trip, and I went to South America, and I was there for a week, and then I came back. We want them to take us with them on that adventure. Not just I got on the plane and I went, but really to focus in maybe just on one interaction that they had with someone while they were there, something that was really meaningful to them. So we would encourage students to take us along with you in writing the essay, and don't just tell us about something that students have done. And some of these things, I mean, students, you know this, you know to draft and to edit and to proof. Things like that are very important. Spell check is awesome, but spell check's not going to catch everything, and we probably all have stories to tell about how something was misspelled or a typo or a message went out a little differently than we intended it to because we depended a little too much on spell check. Again, we use the essay to enhance the student's application. We really want to get to know the student in 3D, not just as a test score, not just as a GPA, not just as a list of courses. The essays are a way that we can do that. In addition to the essays, then we also depend on recommendations. We ask students to submit 2 recommendations, to have 2 submitted on their behalf, one from their counselor and one from a teacher. Recommendations for us are all about the content of the recommendation. They are not about the title. They're not about the letterhead. They're not about, you know, this is coming from a CEO of a large company. This is coming from a UNC alum. This is coming from a governor or a senator. It's not who writes the recommendation. It's what they write that makes the difference. And for a recommendation to really help the student gain admission in our process, the students have to ask someone to write on their behalf who really knows them well and knows them as a student. So if you're asking for a recommendation to be submitted to UNC, tell students you don't want to go hand somebody a resume and a transcript and say, here, and then have that person turn around and write what's on your resume and what's on your transcript. We're going to see those pieces of information. What we need to see is something that's going to take us beyond that, that's going to tell us a story. Again, in a way to show, not tell. Bring us along so we get to know. This recommendation helps us get to know you as a student. That's really important. And not just you are the best, you know, captain of the soccer team, but why? That's the person you want to write the recommendation for us, the person who can say not just that you're the best at something, but why best. So those are the main things that we take into consideration: the academics, the activities or engagement, essays, recommendations. And then we have some institutional considerations that we will look for as well. We are looking for student with special talent, and for us, special talent can involve music, drama, of course, everybody always thinks athletics, and certainly that's a part of it, but they're different talents that students bring, and that's important to us as we build our class. So from our perspective, again, music, drama, athletics, if you have really unique talents in those areas, we want to know about that. Because we're a public university, and because the University of North Carolina was chartered, and in our charter it says to first educate the people of North Carolina, we have a limit on how many non-North Carolinians we can admit to our class. We're 82% in-state, 18% out-of-state. And whether you're looking at us or other public universities, not all of them, obviously, because you've heard from Casey about Arizona State, but from some other public universities, that might be something that you're going to want to ask is, does it matter whether you're from that state or not from the state? How does that impact the admissions decision? Then the other thing we always take into consideration are students with learning disabilities or learning challenges. We encourage students to tell us that on the front end, and we can take all of that into consideration. We have to hear it from the student, though, and we need documentation to go along with that. So there may be other institutional considerations, but those are the ones I think most people think about and talk about. We very much live with the philosophy that more is not always better. More AP courses just for the sake of taking more AP courses is not always a good thing. As I said before when we talked about engagement, more activities just for the sake of more activities doesn't really get you anything. More recommendations just for the sake of recommendations doesn't get you anything. We want students to have healthy, balanced lives. So if you can take 5 APs, 6 AP courses, that's great. You don't have to take 12. We do have a competitive process. We're competitive for North Carolinians. We are highly competitive for out-of-state students. We will get, this year example, 21,000 out-of-state students applying for roughly about 750 places in the class. So it's competitive. But you can use the essays, use your recommendations, use other ways to demonstrate that you're up to the challenge, you're up to the competitiveness. It's not just always about more. When the applications come in, once they're processed, every application is read initially once, very individually, very thoroughly. It then goes through a series of reviews. Every decision is reviewed twice at a minimum before the decisions are released, and then they go out. And we're always looking for, as we say, the students that we're going to get on the table for, or we're going to jump across the table for them. These are the students who really, really stand out to us, and that's sort of the way our process works.
Great, thank you, Barbara. Next up, we have Jason from Carnegie Mellon.
Sure. Thank you very much, and certainly want to thank Rob and Zinch for allowing me to be a part of this, and then also my colleagues from University of Arizona and University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill. It's great to be a part of this panel, and certainly excited to share with folks our process as it relates to the admission decision. But before I think I go into Carnegie Mellon, I think an often used answer related to college and university admission is it depends. And there are certainly common themes to how we make our decisions, and we all work actually within an established standard known as the Statement of Principles of Good Practice, or SPGP. And this is actually a written document that's set forth by the National Association for College Admission Counseling. And it really states that, regardless of what institution we might be working for, that at the heart of our decisions and our processes, the student has to be the focus. And I think that transcends no matter what institution you might be considering or working with. But it is, I think, the minutia of how we recruit a class, how we read applications, or maybe even award financial aid that can depend on our own unique institutional goals, the missions, or the makeup of our respective institutions. And that's where it kind of becomes, well, it depends on the particular institution. For those of you who may not know or be aware, Carnegie Mellon is a private research university of nearly 6,000 undergraduate students, and we are located in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. It's a balmy 7 degrees here right now, so we're a little chilly. 50% of the university is comprised of science, technology, engineering, math, and computer science. And the other 50% is located within our Visual and Performing Arts program, School of Business, and our College of Humanities and Social Sciences. As far as numbers go, we look to enroll an incoming first-year class of roughly 1,450 students. This year we received 19,803 applications for those spots. But I think what defines our admission process more than anything else, in all honesty, is that when we look at an applicant, we are actually looking at them for specific areas academically or artistically within the university. And in fact, there are 14 different doors, if you will, into Carnegie Mellon University. So applicants are actually therefore reviewed with the content or the context, the applicant pool for their specific college or school that their intended major is located within, as opposed to looking at that student in the context of the greater applicant pool. But regardless of what area students are applying to, we do require the common application online, certainly. In addition to the common application questions, there are separate questions specific to Carnegie Mellon, and there are many institutions out there that use the Common App that they may have specific questions directly related to their process that they want to ask students. And most important of these questions that we ask our applicants is to which area or areas of the university that student is wanting to apply to. And honestly, and actually under regular decision, students can apply up to 3 different areas of the university. For example, if a student is extremely interested in applying to our Bachelor's of Fine Arts program for the School of Art, but also interested in our School of Computer Science, they can indicate that on the Common Application Supplement questions for Carnegie Mellon, and in that case, that student is reviewed in both the context for the School of Art as well as the School of Computer Science. And last year, the average applicant actually applied to 1.74 areas of the university, so about 1 or 2. So as a student applies, and regardless of where a student might be applying to within Carnegie Mellon, what do we consider, and what do we use to help make our admission decisions? And I've always said that I think as my job as an admission counselor is really twofold. It's one, to ensure that the students who are offered admission can succeed in an academically rigorous environment. And I think any admission office really, while they're looking to enroll a class, they're really also making sure that they're looking to graduate a class as well. However, it's also my job to ensure that our campus community is comprised of engaging, talented, passionate individuals who want to be here and make this place an even more special place than it already is. And in order to do this, our process, as my other colleagues have shared, is really taking a look at not only the non-academic indicators, but also the non-academics as well. This is, again, that holistic approach that you've heard tonight, as well as you'll continually to hear about moving forward in the admission process. And I'll tell you, first and foremost, that the academic background of the student, the preparedness, is the most important piece of our admission process. And we do review your transcripts, certainly. we take a look at the profile of the school that your school counselor or guidance counselor will be submitting. We're looking at your course selection. And as was shared just recently, the curriculum that you had an opportunity to take, that's important to us. And then seeing within that curriculum that you were offered, what classes you chose to take. And then certainly we take a look to see what those grades are. For us, it's more important that what the student is taking in 10th, 11th, and 12th grade than what they took in 9th grade. And for some of our students who are applying to more of our quantitative programs like the School of Computer Science, Engineering, the math and science classes of their curriculum are more important to us as well. Now that's not to say that the others are not important, but greater emphasis is placed on certain classes in some regard. And then in addition to the transcript, 2 letters of recommendation are used, one from the school counselor or guidance counselor, second from an academic source. Essays, I think, oftentimes straddle that academic and non-academic area as well. It's certainly as students want to submit letters of recommendation from multiple programs, people, but also I think the essays, because they have an opportunity to talk about not only who they are and what they've experienced both in the classroom or outside of the classroom, but it really is, an opportunity to kind of share yourself and talk a little bit about what makes you unique. And we require 2 essays. One, the common application essay, and the second, specifically for Carnegie Mellon, is that we want the students to share with us why they are considering studying that particular major or program at Carnegie Mellon, and that they've thoughtfully kind of gone through that process of thinking what they might want to ultimately do in terms of a career or study at the university. And if a student is applying to more than one area, then they don't need to submit multiple essays, but they do need to thoughtfully include those multiple programs within that essay as we review them for the specific program. Non-academics certainly can bring campus apart from your academic or artistic strengths. And we look to your application to find out, again, what your passions are, your interests are outside of the classroom or the labs. And I think that there isn't a magic number, and I would totally agree with Barbara in that, that there isn't a magic number or recipe in terms of what non-academics to submit, but really know that as we look to bring students to our campus, that we want them to be able to succeed academically, artistically, but also really contribute to that greater community that makes up the educational institution that is Carnegie Mellon. And we do feel important that the students need to be more than just grades on a transcript or a test taken on a Saturday morning or Saturday afternoon. One area that hasn't been touched on, but something that is part of our process, is what's called demonstrated interest. One of the colleagues that I traveled with, he would term the phrase or use the phrase demonstrated understanding. And this really speaks to the fact that I think many students now are applying to multiple universities. I think the average is between 7 and 10. And it allows, I think, for us to really kind of gauge, has the student taken the opportunity to really get to know us? So we do track throughout the process how many times you may have been on campus or met with us on the road, interviewed with us on campus or with an alum. And you could argue that a student who has done more of those has really taken that time and may be more engaged in the entire process and ultimately enroll. Certainly, by no means is it an exact science, but it is a data point that is captured in one of the many things that we do look at. And standardized tests, part of the academic component of the application certainly are those, and I would say that it's one piece, but you can't really put together a puzzle with just one piece. And those are opportunities for us to see how a student may do, at the academic level and at the academic, rigor that is available at Carnegie Mellon. We require of all of our students to take the SAT reasoning or the ACT with writing supplement. We don't prefer one over the other, but we do want to see that students submit all of their testing to us, and then we would then look to benefit those students by choosing the higher of the two. Also require students whose first language is not English to submit an English language proficiency test, either the TOEFL or the IELTS. And I think a requirement in our process that speaks specifically to students applying to different areas of the university are our standardized SAT sub-test requirements. And as you can see in the next slide, that the SAT, in addition to the SAT reasoning and ACT writing, we do require 2 SAT subject tests for the vast majority of our applicants, except for a few programs in our College of Fine Arts. However, which SAT subject test you submit is really dependent upon what area of the university you are applying. And a very common question from some of our applicants who take the ACT is that if they take the SAT, do they still need to take the SAT subject tests? And the answer to that is yes. Those subject tests are an important piece of the process. Again, as we review applicants to specific areas of the university, I think it's important to take a look at some of our Bachelors of Fine Arts programs. And first, I'll touch on our visual arts programs. In addition to the application, the academic components of the application, the SAT or ACT, we require our students in the School of Art and the School of Design to submit a portfolio, which is worth 50% of the admission decision. The faculty review those portfolios. Their suggestions come into the admission committee for the School of Art or the School of Design, and that is combined with the other criteria. For those students, art and design subject tests are not required. The other 2 areas of our fine arts program, these would be conservatory style, our School of Drama, and School of Music. And as you can see, 80%, if not 90%, of the admission decision is based on that required audition. And certainly the academics are viewed, the SAT or ACT is viewed, but really those become secondary to the artistic talents of the students that are going through the audition or reviews for and drama. And lastly, with our process, I think it's important to note that there are several admission plans and deadlines throughout this process. I think you'll find many colleges and universities kind of follow a similar linear path, but not all. Some institutions have rolling admission plans. For Carnegie Mellon, we have specific admission deadlines. We also have specific admission mail dates that we adhere to. And I guess the last thing that I would offer up is that, as you are thinking about this process, never hesitate to contact admission counselors. We're here to help and try to make this process as informative and as easy as process. We know that there's a lot to it, but if you don't take, if you only take one thing away from my conversation, I me to ask you, or permit me to ask you to take this away, and don't wait until the 59th minute of the 11th hour of the last day to submit your application. This is an important process, and you definitely want to make sure that you know what you need to send, where you need to send, and what we are in our own respective institutions might be looking for. Thank you.
Great, thank you everyone. So now we're going to open up the floor to your questions. So as I mentioned earlier, you can go ahead and type them into your GoToWebinar control panel and send them over my way, and I will ask them of our presenters. So first one, we're going to keep Jason on the hot seat here. First question for you, Jason. What do you suggest if a student has a broad range of interests with demonstrated multiple talents, e.g. fine arts, humanities, natural sciences, in terms of applying to Carnegie Mellon?
Sure. Thanks for the question. said, I think that if a student is equally, so I think that the answer to that, does the student fully want to be enrolled in multiple programs through their time at Carnegie Mellon? If they want to double major, if they will be equally happy at Carnegie Mellon being in the School of Art and the School of Computer Science, then definitely apply to both programs. And you could be admitted to both programs. And we have, I mentioned before, 14 different portals or doors into the university. And some of our doors, some of our majors, allow students to be fully enrolled in more than one area. And that's a great way for a student who has multiple talents, multiple interests, who wants to combine them. If a student simply wants to major and minor in something, or take a few random classes, you can do that pretty much at any institution, and it's really looked favorably on. And if that's your approach, you don't need to apply to multiple programs. They're just things that kind of come to fruition when you're at the university. But if you're really interested in applying to more than one area, regular decision is the right way to go. Thanks.
Great, thanks. Next one for Barbara. We have a question about ROTC. So does the Army ROTC help your decision process or influence your decision process?
For us, it's something that we're interested in knowing about. It does not play a significant role in the admissions process. So we'll sit down and talk with our ROTC units on campus, Army, Navy, Air Force, and see what their interests are, see who they're aware of, that those students have been offered the ROTC scholarship or are in the running for the ROTC scholarship. We'll make sure their applications get every possible consideration. If a student is on the proverbial fence for admission, then that might be just the factor that would push them to the positive side. But beyond that, it's not something that we give tremendous strength to. So it's not going to override something that's lacking in the academic area, for example.
Thank you. Casey, Arizona State. We have a question about, let's see here, in terms of in-state versus out-of-state applicants, are they viewed differently by Arizona State, or does it not matter where they live geographically?
That's a really good question. Just like North Carolina Chapel Hill, we are a state institution, which means that we do need to have a majority of our student body from the state of Arizona. We look at that as about a 65-35 population. We are an extremely diverse university. About 35% of our students are not from the state of Arizona, and many in-state institutions you're going to find are more of a 90-10 split, where only 10% are not from their state. So we like to be very diverse. Our admissions criteria is slightly different. The slight being that the test scores for a non-resident student are slightly higher than the test scores for a resident Arizona student, because we are charged with first and foremost educating the Arizona public. And the reason we're a state institution is that our state taxpayers pay into the education system. We're supported by the state, and so that's one of the benefits of having paid state taxes, is you are more likely to be able to get the education from the state institution than someone from outside of the state. But it's a very slight difference. So we strongly encourage students from all over the country to consider Arizona State University, because it's not the main determinant for us in terms of admission criteria.
Thank you. Back to Jason, we have a question here from a parent. What is the difference between taking an AP test and taking an SAT subject test? How are those different?
Yeah, sure. Very good question. So first and foremost, the big difference is that the SAT subject tests are required in our process for applicants other than some of our College of Fine Arts programs. AP, when we're looking at a student who is in an AP curriculum, for us, what's most important is their grade for the year-long subject. And in fact, we in the admission office aren't the place, or isn't the place, that is giving credit potential credit for AP scores of 4s and 5s. That is an academic decision. We certainly, if a student is within an AP curriculum and that's what's offered to them, we're going to expect that they are taking the strongest rigor that they can. And we look to see what their scores were for the test, but what's most important for us are the grades within that curriculum.
Great, thank you. We have a few questions I'm going to try and lump into one, and we're going to have all three of you answer, starting with Barbara. This is, can you please talk about whether you consider a student's financial need? So, in other words, are these schools need aware or need blind in admissions? And in a similar vein, is socioeconomic background, ethnicity, are those considerations that come into the college admission process?
Okay, so in North Carolina, we need blind in the admissions process. So we are not aware of students' financial need. We also are an institution that's very, very committed to access. So at this point, we are still able to provide 100% funding to students who have that level of demonstrated need. We actually have a program called the Carolina Covenant Program, and you don't have to be a North Carolina resident for it. But if your family is at 200% of the poverty level, so roughly $40,000 income for a family of 4 through the course of a year, then this program allows the students to graduate debt-free. And that comes about in the way that the financial aid packages are put together. So if you're not familiar with financial aid and financial aid packaging, the money that comes to students can come from different sources. So there might be loan money, there might be money for work study where students are working on campus a certain number of hours a week. There can be grant money, different types of funding that can come together. So we package those students who are Covenant Scholars in such a way that by the time they graduate from their undergraduate experience at UNC, they don't owe anybody a penny. So we are need blind in admissions, but we do everything we can when students have been admitted to help them find ways to come to the university. In terms of do we consider low socioeconomic status, first generation college, race, ethnicity in admissions, we do. All of those factors are part of our admissions process. None of those factors automatically lead to an admission decision of one type or the other. So we want to know that. Again, we're building a community. We want to bring people into the community from all different backgrounds and life experiences. We want students to learn from each other, and with that mission of access, we want to make sure that we're providing opportunities to students who, in a more traditional sense from their family background, whether it's because of finances or whatever their situation might be, we want to make sure we have those students represented. Again, it's one of many factors. They're never the driving factor in and of themselves.
Great, thank you. Casey, I'm going to ask you the same question. We had some more questions around this area asking about first-generation students and as well as undocumented students. So go ahead, Casey.
Oh, fun times. Okay. Same with Arizona State University. We are need blind when it comes to our admissions decisions because we are a rolling admissions institution. So it takes us about 6 to 8 weeks to evaluate a student's application, and we start admitting students in September of their senior year of high school. So you can't even tell us what your need is until the spring semester of your senior year. So we absolutely make admissions decisions without any financial information to go off of. That said, we also are very interested in being as accessible as possible, and every year ASU gives out over $1 billion in financial aid. Over 70% of our students do receive some sort of financial assistance, and for our Pell eligible students who have an expected family contribution of 0, from the state of Arizona, we do have a unique program called the Obama Scholars Program that does the same thing. We're trying to have students leave college without any debt. Unfortunately, we are not able to give that program to our non-resident students. And so we do always work with our students. We try to be as transparent as possible about our cost of attendance. Not only do we have a cost estimator on our website, we also have a budget worksheet so students can work out their individual costs to attend Arizona State University. And we do automatically review all admitted students for our merit-based scholarships and have a scholarship estimator on our website as well. So students can come in with a lot of information about what it's going to cost to attend ASU, what kind of academic merit aid they can receive, and then as soon as they file the FAFSA and sent that FAFSA to us, we can review them and package them with the rest of the need-based aid, which is grants, work study, additional scholarship, student loans, parent loans, things like that. But we have an amazing admissions counselor staff as well as really great financial aid counselors, and we want to walk students through that process and let them know that it's okay for cost to be a reason that they choose a college or a reason why they end up not choosing a college. And so we want to walk them through that and let them know if they're choosing ASU, what does that look like for their financial burden for that 4 years, and walk them through what their smart choices are. In terms of undocumented students, we unfortunately as a state institution cannot offer any of our merit-based scholarships or financial aid to an undocumented student. However, we will work with those students to find them additional scholarship opportunities, private scholarship opportunities to help cover that cost of attendance. We absolutely encourage all students, regardless of immigration status, to attend our institution, but again, would walk with them on what that financial cost is going to look like at our institution.
Thanks, Casey. And Jason, same question.
Oh, sorry about that. Sure. So in the admission process is need blind. We do not factor in a family's ability or lack thereof to pay for the cost of attendance, tuition, and board and fees. However, I will say that under our wait list process, we do reserve the right to be need sensitive if we need to be. And I say that because a few years ago, when the economy was bad for a lot of institutions, we had to be sensitive with that particular group of our applicant pool. But that was only 1 or 2 years. So through regular decision, early decision, we're need blind. I would agree with everything that's already been said from my colleagues that diversity is an extremely important piece of our mission at Carnegie Mellon, and I think that diversity in every facet that you can think, whether this be diversity of citizenship, diversity of gender, racial diversity, religious diversity. I mean, really, again, I would say that we're also looking to build a community that's as representative as possible. About 15 to 17% of our students that come in each year to our first-year class are non-U.S. citizens, and we are an extremely diverse, again, in every facet. Undocumented students, this is an issue that, as we're looking at them in the admission process, in this valued population within the admission process, they are not looked at any differently than any of our applicants. However, it's really in the financial aid process where it becomes tricky for us because we actually do not provide any financial assistance, merit-based or need-based, for non-U.S. citizens. Students coming in from China or India that are coming on a student visa, or unfortunately for undocumented students. So this becomes kind of where the difficult tightrope for us is in the process.
Great, thanks, Jason. I'm going to keep you on here for the next question we have, which is, the FAFSA has an order of listing colleges, and that's getting a lot of press as this order impacts admissions in terms of demonstrated interest. Is that something that Carnegie Mellon uses at all in terms of demonstrated interest, so that you can see what the order of schools are listed on the FAFSA?
Yeah, that's a great question, and the answer to that is absolutely no. That, in our mind, that's not what the demonstrated interest is all about. It really is, for us, demonstrated is the number of times a student has taken the opportunity to connect with us in the admission process, not financial aid. Coming to campus, meeting with us on the road, meeting with some of our alumni. This is for us what demonstrated interest is. We do not want to know what the students' ranks are or choices are. That is something that is an individual choice and not part of our admission process.
Thanks. And just to be clear, that's demonstrated interest is something that Carnegie Mellon looks at, but not our other two schools. So you guys are off the hook for that question. And another question for you, Jason. Can you please talk about your admission rates under early decision, early action versus regular decision? In other words, is it easier to get in if you apply early, or when should students look at applying early?
Yeah, that's a great question. So first, we don't have early action. We have early decision and regular decision. The vast majority of our students that are being admitted to Carnegie Mellon are coming through regular decision. As I mentioned before, about 1,450 students come in each year. Around 200 to 300 each year are coming in through early decision. And if you take a look at the acceptance rates, they actually are very similar between early decision and regular decision. And very similar, I'm talking about a couple tenths of a point. And the reason for that is because we feel students need to have a certain academic or artistic background in addition to other things in order to be successful at the university. And that ought not change for us whether the student is applying early decision or regular decision. What we feel a student needs to have to be successful and what we are looking for in a candidate doesn't change from early decision to regular decision. Now, any institution that has early decision, they know as they're looking at that applicant that if they're admitted, they're going to come. So that's, again, a piece of the puzzle, but not the focal point within our process.
Great. Now, you're on a roll right now, so I'll give you one more and then I'll let you off. And folks, thanks for all your questions. We have time for probably about 3 more that I've already picked out here, so I'm going to get through those and let you off right at the end of the hour. But Jason, this is another one for you. And there's a few around this, so I'll try and do kind of an amalgamation of these questions. But regarding students choosing a major, choosing an area of interest when they apply to Carnegie Mellon, what do you do for students? What do you recommend for students that don't know what they want to do? Or at the same time, how do you look at these applications and see or gauge how passionate they are about their intended major? Does that play a factor?
Yeah, that's a very good question, and I think that is something that is unique to Carnegie Mellon because we're a place that maybe not unique. One of the things that sets us apart from different places is that students actually, we don't have a general education curriculum across the university. Students begin taking classes, for example, in engineering from the first semester. If they're in computer science, they're taking computer science. What classes they're taking is dictated by the academic area as opposed to the university. So really, Carnegie Mellon is a place where students do need to know, I think, a little bit more of what they may want to ultimately do than not. And that's not to say that students can't come in undecided. They can come in undecided to engineering, or undecided to our humanities and social science college, but they're not undecided across the university. So I think that as you are looking at a place like Carnegie Mellon, I think that you need to know that students need to know that they do need to have a bit more focus and kind of understanding of what they're getting into. And again, that's where that understanding, that connecting to the university really is. Some students will come in and, again, they do have multiple interests and they want to first focus very in-depthly into one area, let's say the sciences, but they want to then build in other areas a part of that, and that's certainly okay. But again, I think by and large, the students that are looking at Carnegie Mellon, they have a little bit more understanding of what they may want to ultimately do, and that's tough. That's really tough for a 17 or 18-year-old student, and we get that, but that is something that's kind of unique to us.
Great, thanks. We're going to have a quick question here for Barbara, and then I'll have a final question for all three of you. So Barbara, this question from a parent about UNC. In terms of selecting students in-state, do you consider geographic diversity, meaning do you look to have students represent a wide array of high schools throughout the state? How do you compare public versus private schools, and how do you compare students from what might be more competitive publics to less competitive publics?
Sure. Again, that's a great question. It's one that we get quite often. Those are questions and discussions that seem to happen quite a bit around the state of North Carolina in a variety of settings. So let me first say we have no quotas. Other than 82% in-state, 18% out-of-state. When we're looking within the state of North Carolina, there are absolutely no quotas by cities, by counties, or by high schools. Do we want students from all over the state in Chapel Hill and on campus? Absolutely we do. We will end up every year with almost all of the 100 counties in the state represented in the class. We usually come close, 97, 98, but that's just the byproduct of the selection process. It's not with a formula of any sort that says we want X percent from this county or X percent from that county. So that type of geographical representation in the state, again, is just something that happens as a byproduct. We don't go into it with a plan of X percent or X percent. When we look at public schools versus private schools, it's funny because I'll often talk to folks from both settings, and the folks in the public school setting always tell me how much easier it is for students from the private schools to be admitted to the university. And then when I go to the private schools, I always hear how much easier it is for students from the public schools. So that makes me think that we're being fair, sort of equal opportunity offenders, if you will. We don't look at students and compare students from one school to another, whether that be from a public school to a private school or public school to public, private to private. When we are evaluating candidates, we're looking at them as individuals in three different contexts. One is the context of their own high school, whatever that high school is, whatever that high school has to offer. Doesn't matter if it's public or private, it's whatever that high school offers, and what has the student done they're taken advantage of at their particular school. We're then looking at students in the context of the overall applicant pool. So how do they fare when we're looking at 10,000 North Carolina applicants for 2,800 places in the class? How do they compete in that overall pool? And then the third area we've sort of touched on before is the area of their own life experiences. What have they done? Have they had opportunities, privileges that they've really expanded on and taken advantage of? Have they not had a lot given to them, but maybe they've worked hard to create their own opportunities? We're interested in those types of things, but we don't get into that. If I were a public school rather than this private school, I'm sure I would be the valedictorian. Or if I were at the private school instead of the public school, I'm sure I would be this or that instead. Just doesn't work that way in our process.
Great, thank you. And we'll stick with you, Barbara, for this last question.
Did that cover it all, Jason?
That's perfect.
Okay. Sorry, Rob.
So we'll stick with you on this last one, and we'll go to Casey and then Jason to wrap it up. But from a current high school junior who's anxious to get started with the college admissions process, and they just want to know, generally speaking, any advice that you have for them. So I'll kind of change that to each of you can have one piece of advice for a high school junior as they finish up their junior year and begin applying senior year. What's one piece of college admissions related advice that you have for that student?
Okay. if I can, a little leeway, I want to offer one piece to the student and one piece to the parent, and they really tie together. For the students, I would say take control of this process. This is about you. It's about where you're going to spend what your parents hope will be 4 years. Maybe you might hope 5 years, but 4 to 5 years of your undergraduate college experience. It's important that you're happy where you are. If you're happy where you are, you're going to perform better. You're just going to be more successful in so many ways. But you need to take control. You need to do the research. You need to have a big say in where you go to visit, what schools you consider, where you apply. It's a lot of responsibility, but it's very, very important that students do that. The piece that ties into that for parents is parents, you have to let your students, you have to let your children do that. And it's hard. It's very hard for a lot of parents to do that, to sort of make this transition to sitting in the back seat instead of driving the car. But that would be my advice to students, is to really jump in, expect a roller coaster ride. It's going to be up and down, and it's going to be exciting. It's going to be just all different types of emotions, but embrace it and go for it, and know that there's more than one school for every student that's out there. There's no such thing as one perfect school. There are a variety of schools where any one student could really be happy.
Thank you, Barbara. Casey, what's your one pearl of wisdom?
Yeah, my one big thing would be, as soon as you come up with at least one thing that you want to compare colleges about, start keeping a list of that comparison. If what's most important to you in college is the location, if it's in an urban metropolitan area or a little bit more rural, small college town, start looking at colleges and comparing them from that standpoint. Or if it's based on a very specific degree program, then start finding the colleges that have that specific degree program for you. Don't let degree program be the only thing that you compare schools on, because I'm sure plenty of high school juniors have no idea what they want to major in yet. I don't want you to think that's what you have to have figured out to find the right college for you. There's a lot of things that can go into fit, and it can be, I need to be able to drive home on the weekends because I'm going to get homesick, or I want to be as far away from where I grew up as possible, and so I'm only going to look at schools across the country. Whatever it is that you can do to narrow down your college search, feel free to start coming up with that list now and really start deciding what it is that you think is going to make that difference. And to parents, I would say the one thing that you could really do to help your student is be honest with them about the financial situation that you're in and what you can afford to help your student to attend college. So if it's saying, you know what, we have saved and we have $5,000 a year to give you towards your college education, and the school you pick needs to be able to come up with the rest of that cost of attendance, let them know that. If you are not willing to take a parent loan to help your student go to school, or if you are adamant that they don't take out any loan at all where they go, make sure your student knows that. I get so heartbroken with students that I talk to that even after we've given them a financial aid package, mom and dad never told them realistically what could be afforded by the family for them to go to college, and they're waiting until July to decide they're not going to come to the school they've selected, and now they're scrambling to get to another institution. So please be honest with your student now about what is realistic, and let them still apply to that school that maybe is a dream school or a reach school, because the financial aid might come through to make that a possibility, but you definitely don't want your student getting their hopes up for most of their senior year to go to one school that they may not ultimately be able to afford.
Thanks, Casey. Jason.
Well, the problem with going last is that all the great advice has already been given. No, but I think that I guess for the students, I think that my piece of advice is really begin to start asking yourself questions, and that's tough. I think that as a young adult, a lot of times you may not have had that kind of internal dialogue of what you really are looking for, what you want, whether it be major or location, and know that the process really should begin with you, and begin with that, really asking yourself again what it is you want, and allow that to then kind of direct you in terms of where you go. The other piece of advice is that there are nearly 4,000 institutions of higher education throughout the United States. It's one of the great parts of the educational system within the United States that there is a ton of variety. And do research and look at not just a particular ranking or number. Each place has great qualities, great people that are associated with that can help direct you to great successes moving forward. For parents, I guess my one piece of advice is don't fill out the application for your student.
Great. Well, I know we went a little bit over, but hopefully that was worthwhile to everyone. Some really wonderful advice from our three presenters and some great questions from the audience. If you have any questions that were unanswered or have more questions, I'll send out an email the next day or so and give you a way to reach out to these three institutions and ask more questions about the admissions process. So thank you, presenters. Thank you, attendees, and everyone have a wonderful night and stay warm.